The plane didn't crash on its first attempt to take off, or its second. It crashed on the third. My friend, before we go any further, sit with that for a second. Twice the pilots aborted takeoff because something felt wrong with the engines. Twice they taxied back. Twice the passengers, some of the greatest young footballers England had ever produced, sat in their seats, waiting, joking, probably annoyed at the delay. And then they tried a third time. What if someone on that plane had simply said no? What if the flight had been cancelled after the second failed attempt, the way it very nearly was? That single decision, try one more time, is the hinge on which one of football's greatest tragedies turned. And almost nobody talks about it that way. This is the story of the Munich air disaster. Not just what happened on that runway in February 1958, but why it happened, who it destroyed, and what it still asks of us almost 70 years later. Stay with me, my friend. This one is heavy, but it matters. To understand what was lost, you first have to understand what was being built. In the mid-1950s, Manchester United had a manager named Matt Busby, who believed in something radical for his time. Youth. Not just youth as a cost-saving measure. Youth as a philosophy. Busby scoured working-class neighbourhoods across Britain and Ireland for teenage talent. He built a youth system so effective that his young players earned a nickname of their own: the Busby Babes, Duncan Edwards, Tommy Taylor, Roger Byrne, Eddie Coleman, David Pegg. These weren't just promising kids, contemporaries who watched them play, teammates, rival players, journalists, described a level of talent that felt almost unfair for players so young. Ask yourself this, my friend: how often in football history has a team been so good, so early, that people struggled to imagine its ceiling? By 1958, United had won the English League title twice in a row. They were chasing a third, and they were pushing into Europe, into the European Cup, at a time when English clubs were still skeptical of continental competition. They weren't just a good team. They were a glimpse of the future. And football, being football, was about to show exactly how cruel the future can be. On February 5, 1958, Manchester United played Red Star Belgrade in Yugoslavia, in the second leg of a European Cup quarter-final. United needed to avoid a heavy defeat to advance. They drew 3-3. It was enough. They were through to the semi-finals. There was a celebration that night. Why wouldn't there be? These were young men, some barely out of their teens, who had just booked a place among the best clubs in Europe. Here's a question worth sitting with, my friend. How many of the people in that room knew it was the last time they'd all be together? None of them, of course. That's the terrible mercy of not knowing. The next morning, the team travelled to Munich, West Germany, for a refueling stop. Their charter plane, a British European Airways airspeed ambassador nicknamed Elizabethan, didn't have the range to fly directly from Belgrade to Manchester. Munich was simply a technical stop, a formality. Nobody was supposed to remember Munich for anything at all. It had been snowing. Slush covered the runway at Munich Riem Airport, a thin, treacherous layer of melting snow and water that pilots at the time didn't fully understand the danger of. Captain James Thane and co-pilot Kenneth Raymond prepared for takeoff. The first attempt aborted. The instruments showed a problem with engine boost pressure. The second attempt aborted again. Same issue. Picture it, my friend. You are sitting on that plane. You've already survived a tense match, a long trip, a celebration. You just want to go home. And twice now, the plane has surged down the runway and stopped. Some passengers, uneasy, actually got off and changed seats, moving further back in the plane, closer to the tail, away from the wings. It was an instinct, a flicker of fear nobody could quite explain. Would you have done the same? There was talk of staying overnight in Munich, of trying again in the morning when conditions might be safer, but there was a match to prepare for, a league fixture back in England just days away. And so the decision was made. Try one more time. At 3:04 p.m., the plane began its third takeoff run. This time it didn't stop. The aircraft failed to gain enough speed. Investigators would later determine the slush on the runway had built up on the wings and undercarriage, robbing the plane of the lift it needed. It plowed through the airport boundary fence. It crossed a road. It struck a house and a fuel hut. The wreckage split. Part of the fuselage caught fire. 23 people died that day, or in the days that followed. Players, coaching staff, journalists, and crew. Among the dead were 8 of United's own players. Men in their early 20s, some barely out of adolescence, who days earlier had been dreaming about a European Cup final. Captain Matt Busby himself was pulled from the wreckage so badly injured that a priest administered last rites. Twice, he survived. Barely. Here's the psychological weight of this moment, my friend, and I want you to really feel it. Survivor's guilt is one of the most devastating and least visible wounds a human being can carry. Bobby Charlton survived that crash. He was thrown clear, still strapped into his seat, and walked away with only minor injuries. He would spend decades processing what it meant to live when his friends did not. Harry Gregg, the goalkeeper, ran back into the burning wreckage, not once, but multiple times, pulling survivors out, including a mother and her baby. Ask yourself, what does courage even mean in a moment like that? Is it the absence of fear, or is it choosing to act while the fear is still screaming at you to run the other way? is where the story could have ended. A club gutted, a dream buried in the wreckage of a Munich runway. Instead, something else happened. Matt Busby, against the advice of doctors who worried the stress might kill him, returned to management. He rebuilt Manchester United from almost nothing. Youth players, reserves, and a handful of survivors, piece by piece. It took exactly 10 years. In 1968, Manchester United won the European Cup, the first English club ever to do so. Bobby Charlton, one of the survivors pulled from that wreckage a decade earlier, lifted the trophy as captain. My friend, I want you to think about what that moment actually represents. It isn't just a football trophy. It's proof that grief and purpose can occupy the same body. It's proof that rebuilding doesn't erase what is lost. It exists alongside it, forever. Busby reportedly wept that night, not only from joy, from 10 years of carrying something most of us can barely imagine. Is that closure? Or is it simply learning to carry weight without being crushed by it? I don't think there's a clean answer. I think that's the point. So why does this story matter today, decades later, to people who never saw the Busby Babes play a single match? Because it forces us to confront something uncomfortable. Greatness is never guaranteed a future. We build narratives around talented young people, footballers, artists, prodigies of every kind, as though their trajectory is fixed, as though the story we're imagining for them is the story that will actually happen. Munich reminds us it isn't. It never is. Here's a question worth carrying with you after this video ends, my friend. How differently would you treat the people around you if you truly believed tomorrow wasn't promised? Not in a morbid way, in a grateful one. The Busby Babes didn't know Belgrade would be their last night together. They didn't know that ordinary refueling stop would become one of football's most infamous tragedies. None of us know which ordinary day is secretly the important one. And there's a second lesson here, quieter but just as important. Survival is not the same as being unbroken. Bobby Charlton went on to become one of the greatest footballers in history. A World Cup winner, a knight, a legend. And he carried Munich with him every single day until his final years. Success didn't erase the wound. It simply gave him a place to stand while he carried it. If you've ever felt guilty for moving forward after a loss, for laughing again, for succeeding again, for being okay again, Charlton's story is worth remembering. Moving forward isn't betrayal. It's what the people we lost would have wanted for us. Today, a clock hangs at Old Trafford, permanently stopped at 3:04, the moment of the crash. A memorial stands at the site in Munich. Every February 6th, Manchester United fans still gather to remember, not out of obligation, out of something deeper. Because the Busby Babes were never just a football team. They were a promise of what youth, hunger, and belief could build. And even though that promise was violently interrupted, it wasn't erased. It was carried forward. By Busby, by Charlton, by a club that refused to let a runway in Munich be the final chapter. My friend, that's the story of Munich. Not just tragedy, though it is that, but also proof of something almost unbearably human. That people can lose everything and still choose, 10 years later, to build something worth losing again. If this story moved you the way it moved me while researching it, do one simple thing before you go. Hit subscribe. Behind the Pitch exists to tell these stories properly, not just as headlines, but as human history. Stories like this deserve more than a footnote. They deserve to be remembered right. And I want to hear from you. Down in the comments, tell me this. If you had been on that plane, watching 2 failed takeoffs, would you have gotten off? Do you think football, or any of us, ever really moves on from something like Munich? Or do we just learn to carry it differently? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single one, and honestly, some of the most powerful parts of this channel come from what you all share down there. If you know someone who loves football history, someone who needs to hear this story, send them this video. Stories like Munich shouldn't be forgotten. They should be passed on. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one, my friend.